Mel Watt to be the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and Patricia Millett to be United States District Judge for the District of Columbia Circuit. And now live to the Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, the giver of gifts, thank you for your unchanging promises that we can claim each day. Lord, you have promised to supply our needs and to work everything together for our good. Bless our lawmakers. Help them to seek not what they can get from you, but what your power can enable them to do for you. Remind them that in prayer, they do not so much hear a voice as acquire a voice. Show them how to use that acquired voice to speak for the voiceless. May they even use their pain to put them in touch with the pain of others. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., October 30th, 2013. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Edward J. Markey, a senator from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Patrick J. Leahy, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Following the remarks of me and Senator McConnell, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the nomination of Alan Estevez to be Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, working with Senator Hagel. This time will be until 10:30, equally divided. At 10:30, there will be a cloture vote on the nomination. If cloture is invoked, we expect to confirm this nomination later today and continue with cloture votes on additional nominations. Mr. President, we always complain about what we don't get done, but I think everyone in the Senate should recognize that as a result of our having changed the rules in the Senate, we're able to move through some of these things much more quickly. We've reduced the time from 30 hours after cloture has been invoked to 8 hours, and that's helped us move through these issues. So everybody complains about our never changing things around here, but we have, and it's helped us expedite some of this stuff. Mr. President, the United States Senate has a privilege of considering the nominations of many exceptionally talented individuals for a variety of jobs. This week, the Senate has already approved 3 qualified and dedicated nominees, including Richard Griffin to serve among the people's watchdogs against labor abuses, and Tom Wheeler to lead the body that oversees the nation's telecommunications industries. This week, we'll consider 5 other fine public servants for a variety of crucial roles in the executive branch. So when one nominee's personal story and professional dedication stands out in this distinguished crowd, it is remarkable, and it is remarkable when we talk about a woman by the name of Patricia Millett. She's been chosen by the President to be a nominee to serve on the D.C. Court of Appeals. She graduated the top of her class from the University of Illinois and then attended Harvard Law School. She clerked the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and served as an appellate attorney in the Justice Department Civil Division. She then served as assistant solicitor under Democratic President Bill Clinton and Republican President George W. Bush. Ms. Millett then was chosen to lead the Supreme Court practice at the prestigious law firm of Aiken Gump, and she's argued more than 32 cases before the United States Supreme Court. This is stunning. It's a number that rarely anyone ever reaches. I'm sure there are others who have reached this number, but the two that come to my mind was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who argued many cases, and a longtime friend, the late Rex Lee, who was Solicitor General during President Reagan. And during his tenure as Solicitor General and prior to that and after that, he argued many, many cases in the Supreme Court. 32 arguments before the Supreme Court is a stunningly high number. But Patricia Millett's professional credentials are matched by her personal integrity and determination. Mr. President, she's a military spouse, mother of 2 children, who argued a case before the Supreme Court while her husband, who serves in the Navy, was deployed in Afghanistan. Ms. Millett has been a literacy tutor for more than 2 decades and volunteers at her church homeless shelter. She has the support of law enforcement officials, legal professionals, and military organizations from across the political spectrum. Her colleagues have called her fair-minded, principled, and exceptionally gifted with unwavering integrity. So it's truly a shame that some Republicans would filibuster this exceedingly qualified nominee for unrelated political reasons. Patricia Millett is nominated to what many call the second most important court in the land, the D.C. Circuit. This court reviews the complicated decisions and rulemakings of federal agencies, and since September 11, 2001, has handled some of the most important terrorism and detention cases in the history of our country. This is what former D.C. Chief Judge Patricia Wald said about the court's caseload, and this is a quote. The D.C. Circuit hears the most complex, time-consuming labyrinth disputes over regulations with the greatest impact on ordinary Americans' lives: clean air and water regulations, nuclear plant safety, health care reform issues, insider trading, and much, much more. These cases can require thousands of hours of preparation by judges, often consuming days of argument, involving hundreds of parties and interveners, and necessitating dozens of briefs and thousands of pages of record, all of which culminates in a lengthy, technically intricate legal opinion. The nature of the D.C. Circuit's caseload is what sets it apart from other courts. That's what former Chief Judge Patricia Wald said. Unfortunately, Mr. President, today the court's functioning far below its full complement of judges. The number of judges was chosen legislatively a long, long time ago. Today, only 8 of the 11 seats on the D.C. Circuit are full. The 3 remaining vacancies are due in part to Republican obstruction of qualified nominees like Caitlin Halligan. Twice she was defeated. Extremely qualified woman. Republicans claim that filling these 3 remaining vacancies on the D.C. Circuit would amount to court packing. Mr. President, this is ridiculous. We're not changing any law. We're filling vacancies. Circuit Court nominees, including nominees for the D.C. Circuit, have waited 7 times longer for confirmation under President Obama as they did under the last President Bush. So it's no mystery why we have a judicial vacancy crisis in America. Making nominations to vacant judgeships is not court packing, Mr. President. It's the President's job. I repeat, filling vacant judgeships is the President's job. It has nothing to do with court packing. Senate Republicans were happy to confirm judge to the D.C. Circuit when President Reagan and George W. Bush were in office. But now that a Democrat serves in the White House, they want to eliminate the remaining 3 vacant D.C. circuits, just eliminate them, although the court's workload has actually grown since President Bush was in office. Republicans are using convenient but flawed political arguments to hamstring our nation's court and deny highly qualified nominees like Ms. Millett for a fair up or down vote. But she deserves better. She deserves a return to the days when all senators, including Republicans, took their duty to advise and consent seriously. Mr. President, I am cautiously optimistic that enough Republicans understand their responsibilities and will allow us to move forward on this very important nomination. She deserves a return to the days when qualified nominees were guaranteed a full and fair confirmation process devoid of political games. It's basically fairness.
Yeah.
Mr. President,
The Republican leader.
each of us was sent here to serve and protect our constituents. That's why Republicans voted unanimously against Obamacare in 2009, because we believed it was our job to stand up for middle-class families we were sent here to represent. Because we, and not just us, but countless health care professionals, policy experts, and citizens across the country saw this train wreck coming literally years ago. We knew the pain it would cause and warned against it. I wish the President and Washington Democrats had listened back then. I really do. I wish we'd been wrong about Obamacare, too. But because the failings of this law are about so much more than a website, they're really about real people. Yes, healthcare.gov fiasco can be seen as almost comical at times, like a surreal parody of government bungling. But as the President says, this is about so much more than a website. He's right about that. The pain this law is causing is not digital, it's real. Workers first began to feel the pain when employers started cutting hours, and then benefits, and some jobs altogether. Spouses felt it when they lost their health coverage they'd had through their husband or wife's job. College graduates felt it when they could only find part-time work, if they could find anything at all in the Obama economy. And this was before basically anyone had even heard of this Obamacare website. Now that the health care law is actually coming online, many Americans are finding they'll be seeing premium increases, or that they'll be getting hit with higher co-pays and deductibles, or that they'll no longer see the doctors or use the hospitals of their choice. In fact, I've been hearing from constituents in western Kentucky that a number of hospitals and health care providers they've relied upon will no longer be available in their network. And in many cases, they'll be responsible for 100% of the costs associated with services performed at those facilities they used to use. Let me repeat, 100% of the cost. How is that an improvement? How is that reform? Many in the middle class are also learning that the health plans they were promised they could keep are being taken away from them anyway. They feel absolutely betrayed, they feel hurt, and they feel vulnerable. When these folks are offered, quote, comparable plans at all, they're often completely unaffordable. And if they poke around on the exchanges, assuming they can even log on, many are finding that Obamacare coverage is going to cost them way too much, not offer them what they want, or both. Here's a note, for example, I recently received from a constituent in Caldwell County. This is what my constituent said. According to our health insurance provider, we can elect to stay on our current plan for this year with less coverage or switch to affordable care plan that provides a little more coverage, but at a cost increase that's almost double. We currently pay $653 per month, and it would increase to over $1,100. After talking to the insurance company today, it seems I was lied to by the President and Congress when they were told that the Affordable Care Act would not require us to switch from our current insurance provider. My husband and I work hard, pay a lot of taxes, and ask for little from our government. Is it asking too much for the government to stay out of my health insurance? Now, her family's not alone. A CNN report this morning estimates that roughly one half of the 600,000 people in Kentucky's private insurance market will have their current insurance plans discontinued by the end of the year. This just isn't right, and it's certainly not fair. It's even more unfair when you consider that the administration chose to exempt businesses from this law for a year, but didn't think the middle class deserved the same treatment? Well, Republicans do. We think the middle class actually deserves a permanent exemption from this law. But as long as partisans in Washington continue to jealously defend Obamacare, well, we'll do at least whatever we can to fight for greater fairness for the middle class. I hope more Democrats will join us to make that happen, because a website can be fixed. But the pain this law is causing, higher premiums, cancel coverage, that's what's really important. And that's what Democrats need to work with us to address by starting completely over with true bipartisan health care reform. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Order. The leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, Department of Defense, Alan F. Estevez of the District of Columbia to be a Principal Deputy Undersecretary.
Under the previous order, the time until 10:30 will be equally divided and controlled in the usual form prior to a vote on the motion to invoke cloture on the nomination. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
A quorum call underway on the floor of the Senate as we await debate and general speeches this morning. We'll go live again to Capitol Hill as Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius is testifying at a House hearing on problems with the healthcare.gov website and the nation's healthcare coverage.
Theoretical problem that was immediately fixed. I would tell you we are storing the minimum amount of data because we think that's very important. The hub is not a data collector. It is actually using data centers at the IRS, at Homeland Security, at Social Security to verify information, but it stores none of that data. So we don't want to be...
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair to recognize Mr. Shimkus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Madam Secretary. Madam Secretary, before I start my questions, the Washington Post gave the administration and the President, yourself, 4 Pinocchios on this whole debate of if you like the insurance you have, you can keep it. Would you recommend to the President that he stop using that term? Wouldn't that be helpful in this debate?
Well, sir, I think he used the term at the time that the law was passed, and he
as of September 26th also. So
that's why we wrote.
So the answer is you don't believe that the Washington Post, and therefore,
Washington.
Well, we'll hand this down to you, and so you can see it. Have you ever shopped? I know you have, but this is for at a grocery store with a coupon.
Yes.
You ever used a coupon?
Yes.
So the coupon gives you the terms and conditions of when you go to the checkout to get whatever's off the price of the goods. When you all added the C Plans Now option, you in essence gave the searcher in essence a coupon based upon what they're seeing there. The desire was let people know what the price is. However, as the news reported, and I followed up in last week's hearing, was that if you are under 50 years old, you get quoted the price of someone who's 27. If you're older than 50, could be 64, you get quoted a price of someone who's 50 years old. Isn't that misleading?
Well, sir, the Learn side of the website, which has been up since actually late.
So that's truthful then. If you quote a price.
It is clearly a hypothetical situation.
Oh,
do you say, wait, people to.
Okay, on the C Plans Now option, are you saying this is a hypothetical? That's not what it says on the site. It says this is the price when you put in your age. And if your age is 49, it quotes you as if you're 27.
Sir, the only way someone can get an accurate information about their price is to get their individual.
Let me ask you another question. When did you decide to use this below 50 at 27 and above 50 at 50 years old? When did you make that decision?
That was decided by the team as
by who? Who made the problem with this whole debate is you all won't tell us who made the decision.
I can tell you I did not design
the
site. I will get.
Well, who made the decision on the 27-year-old quote for someone who's 50?
I just said I will get you that information, sir.
Thank you. Let me go to, because it's misleading, and the White House insists it didn't mislead the public, and of course we find out that you did. Let me finish on this debate. It's another transparency issue. If someone, a constituent of mine, or someone in this country has strongly held pro-life views,
here we go.
Can you commit to us to make sure that the federal exchanges that offer that is clearly identified and so people can understand if they're going to buy a policy that has abortion coverage or not? Because right now, you cannot make that determination.
Sir, I don't know. I know exactly the issue you're talking about. I will check and make sure that is clearly identifiable.
Well, here's our request. Can you provide for the committee the list of insurers in the Federal Exchange who do not offer as part of their
I just said.
No, you said if we can do it.
No, I think we can do that is what I said.
I think or I know we can do it.
Sir, I can't tell you what I don't know firmly right now. I know that is the plan. I will get that information to you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair to recognize Mr. Engel from New York.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary. I appreciate your coming here today to answer questions about the Affordable Health Care Act. You know, my Republican colleagues' actions here remind me of a story I read when I was a little boy, and that's the story of Chicken Little, who ran around yelling, "The sky is falling, the sky is falling." But unlike Chicken Little, my Republican colleagues are actually rooting for the sky to fall. Republicans are holding this hearing today under the auspices of an investigative hearing, as if they want to get to the bottom of what went wrong with the website in order to help fix it. But I don't think, Madam Secretary, there's one person in this room who is naive enough to actually think that the Republicans want to see this law work. They voted over 40 times to repeal the law. They shut down the government and threatened to force a default in order to stop it. They're rooting for failure. Madam Secretary, can you tell us what would be the impact on Americans' health insurance if Republicans had been successful in their efforts to defund or repeal the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I think that the estimates of the Congressional Budget Office is that would have increased the deficit by about $110 billion in the first decade and close to $1 trillion in the second decade. We know that we have 42 or 43 million Americans without health insurance at all, some of them Medicaid eligible and some in the over the Medicaid eligibility. 30 governors so far, Republicans and Democrats, have declared their support for moving ahead with Medicaid expansion, but absent that, the Affordable Care Act, those folks would be without any kind of health security. And in the private market, what we know is it takes a real toll. But I'd say the biggest issue is not just the financial toll, not the community toll, not the country toll, which is significant. I have a good friend who runs the Cancer Center at the University of Kansas. I was with him and cancer researchers recently, and he said that if you get a cancer diagnosis, you are 60% more likely to live 5 years and beyond if you have insurance than if you don't. I think that's a pretty powerful statement for why we need affordable health care for all of our citizens.
Well, thank you. The Republicans have not been able to defund or repeal it, but they have denied requested funding. They've raised specious arguments about death panels and socialized medicine, and they've worked to intimidate groups that could help the implementation effort. There's been a spreading of misinformation about the cost of coverage. We hear some of that today, and to actively dissuade the uninsured from seeking coverage. So, Madam Secretary, how are these tactics impacted your ability to implement the Affordable Care Act?
Well, I don't think there's any question that a lot of people need a lot of information. I think it's one of the reasons we had millions visit the site, try to visit the site. It's why I am so frustrated and disappointed that the site is not fully functional and why I'm so committed to getting it functional, because clearly there is a demand. We need to get information to people about the law. This is the law. This is not any longer a debate. It was a law passed by both houses of Congress, signed by the President of the United States, upheld by the Supreme Court. The President was reelected. It is the law, and people have benefits and rights under that law, and we've got to get that information so they can make good choices for themselves and their families.
Well, thank you. It is the law, and frankly, I find it disconcerting that my Republican colleagues have done nothing but root for this law to fail for the last 3.5 years, and now there's a big show here of being upset at problems with the website, keeping people from signing up for coverage fast enough. So I would just say to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you're really on the wrong side of history here. The website will be fixed, and millions of Americans will be able to get quality, affordable health insurance coverage through the Affordable Care Act. And again, I thank you for being here today, Madam.
Mr. Pitts, Chairman of the Health Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Madam Secretary. Have you personally tried to register or enroll on the website?
Sir, I created an early light account so I would see the prompts that were coming to people who were interested. I did work my way to the application feature fairly early on, but frankly, I have affordable health care, so I
No, I just want to know if you'd been through the process that millions of Americans are having to go through. Madam Secretary, the initial website crashes appear to be...
The Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, today we're debating whether the Senate is going to be allowed to vote on the confirmation of Patricia Millett. She's nominated to fill the vacancy that our current Chief Justice, John Roberts, previously occupied on the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. Now, if she's confirmed, as of course she should be, she'll be only the sixth woman to serve on the D.C. Circuit in its more than 120-year history. She's an extraordinary nominee. She has impeccable credentials for this important appellate court. I, like so many others across this country, hope that her confirmation is not going to suffer from the partisanship and gridlock that consumed Congress earlier this month. Patricia Millett has had a brilliant legal career. She's argued 32 cases before the Supreme Court, actually holding the record until recently for the most Supreme Court arguments by a woman attorney before the court. She's argued dozens of cases in the federal courts of appeals. She's briefed numerous cases in the Supreme Court and also appellate courts across the nation. She served for 15 years in the U.S. Department of Justice in both Democratic and Republican administration. She worked for 4 years in the appellate staff of the Civil Division. She argued cases in federal and state appellate courts, including the successful constitutional defense of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the inclusion of In God We Trust on federal currency. She spent over a decade in the Solicitor General's office. Her stellar reputation led a bipartisan group of 7 former Solicitors General to praise her as unfailingly fair-minded. In 2004, Republican Attorney General John Ashcroft awarded Ms. Millett the Attorney General's Distinguished Service Award for representing the interests of the United States before the Supreme Court. And since 2007, she's led the Supreme Court practice in the Washington, D.C. office of Aiken Gump. Her work in private practice spans commercial litigation and administrative law, constitutional matters, statutory construction, and even criminal appeals. She's represented Army reservists and business interests, including the Chamber of Commerce, as well as civil rights plaintiffs. Ms. Millett is a nominee with unquestionable integrity and character. She's committed herself to pro bono work. She's done this throughout her career. She's also engaged in some very significant community service. It was interesting at a press conference I held yesterday when we had spouses of people in the military, and we talked about another aspect of her career. Her husband is now a retired Navy reservist, but as a military spouse, when he was called up, Ms. Millett has a personal understanding of the sacrifice we ask of our service members and their families. At the very height of her legal career, her husband was called on to deploy as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He left the course, as those who are called to serve do. But she's left at home with 2 young children. And what did she do? She did what spouses all over this country do. She filled the role of both parents at home, while her husband served in the Navy overseas. In fact, just the other day, the Senate passed a bipartisan resolution to honor families like Ms. Millett's. We commemorate October 26th as the Day of the Deployed. So not only is she committed to her own military family, she has helped to secure employment protection for members of our National Guard and Reserve through her pro bono legal work. Mr. President, I know that the distinguished presiding officer is concerned about the Guard and Reserve in his state of Massachusetts, as I am in my state of Vermont. You also know the strains that they face. And in a case decided by the Supreme Court in 2011, Ms. Millett represented an Army reservist who was fired in part because some of his co-workers who stayed at home didn't like his military absences. She stood up for every Guard member, every reservist in Vermont or Massachusetts or any other state in this country. And the successful arguments that Ms. Millett helped craft have made it easier for all members of our Reserve and National Guard to protect their rights under the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. And through her legal work, she's earned broad bipartisan support. That includes the support of Peter Keisler and Carter Phillips and Kenneth Starr and Ted Olson and Paul Clement, and a bipartisan group of 110 appellate practitioners, as well as 37 deputy solicitors general and assistants to the solicitor general from both Republican and Democratic administrations. She is supported by both the national president of the National Fraternal Order of Police and the deputy commissioner of the New York Police Department. She has the support of the military community, including Major General Clark McNair, U.S. Army retired, Michael Hall, Command Sergeant Major of the U.S. Army retired, Blue Star families, and a gallant few. In fact, the list is so long, I ask unanimous consent to include a list of those letters of support for her in the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
You know, if a president was to be given a textbook about the type of nominee to send to the United States Senate, or if United States senators were given a textbook of the type of person to confirm, this would be the golden standard right here. We shouldn't even be having this debate. She should have been confirmed unanimously weeks ago. She's the kind of nominee we should support because hers is a great American story of dedication, diligence, patriotism, and extraordinary professional ability. So I hope nobody's going to get involved in partisan politics and choose to filibuster. She deserves to be confirmed. I might say, incidentally, in the same seat on the court, when a Republican president nominated a man named John Roberts to that seat, he came here on the Senate floor. As I recall, all Democrats and all Republicans supported him. Okay. For the D.C. Circuit, for the seat that she's been nominated for. He was supported not because we agreed with him, a lot of Democrats did not agree with him philosophically on all issues, but we knew he was highly qualified. So he was confirmed to that seat. I don't think it's any stretch to say she's just as qualified. Same seat. The only difference is it's a Democratic president who has nominated her. Standards should be the same. Same standards that allow John Roberts to be confirmed to that seat with a Republican president are the same standards that should allow her to be confirmed to the seat with a Democratic president. She should be confirmed there. And you know, Mr. President, something I've talked about, what the caseload is. Well, President Bush, when the caseload was 121 cases per judge, Republican-controlled Senate had no problem in confirming confirming seats to fill 11 seats. Now, when the caseload was 185 instead of 121, but a Democratic president, we're told, gosh, we got to cut back. We got too many judges. It doesn't pass the giggle test. The fact is, this is what Republicans said, and we voted for people for these 11 seats. Now, when 3 of those seats are vacant, we're trying to fill one, the same one that John Roberts had. Some are saying, well, maybe we have too many judges. Well, back then we had 121 cases per judge, now we got 185. No matter how you do it, the issue comes down simply, is this nominee qualified? Mr. President, I've had the great privilege of serving in this body for almost 40 years. I voted on thousands of judges, nominated by both Republicans and Democrats. I voted to confirm the vast majority of them, from whether they're Republican president or a Democratic president. I have a hard time thinking back through all those thousands of judges to find even a handful as well qualified as this woman is, or as much of a need to have somebody in there. So, you know, this is important. This is not only important on the merits, and on the merits, it's an easy, easy case. There should be no delay based on politics, though. At a time when the American people are looking at the Congress and saying, what are you people doing? First, the shutdown and other things. Don't give one more example that would bring upon the scorn of the American people toward this great body by saying no to somebody that every single person, no matter what their politics are, no matter what part of the country they're from, they know how qualified she is. They know how qualified. And, you know, I was thinking yesterday when the group representing spouses of the military spoke about what she did to maintain her legal career, but first and foremost take care of her family while her husband was abroad, and then even help such things as to help provide food to food kitchens for those less able and less fortunate. You know, it's almost when you see a background like this, you say it's too good to be true, but in this case, it's all true. So let's confirm her. Mr. President, what is the parliamentary situation?
The Senate right now is considering the Estevez nomination. And the time right now is equally divided between both sides.
Mr. President, I would then give up the floor. I would suggest the absence of quorum and ask for the time to be equally divided.
Without objection, so ordered, and the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Madam President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection. Under the previous order, the clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.